The other disappointment that I wanted to bring up was the Ontario Green Party, especially under Mike Schreiner. They occupy a particular niche in the political landscape, one that has managed to simultaneously provoke mild approval from mainstream liberals while also getting total disdain from the principled left. And to understand why, I think you have to recognize that the Ontario Greens, much like their federal counterparts, exist in a strange ideological space. They want to be taken seriously as a responsible party of governance while clinging to the branding of environmental and social justice radicalism. And nowhere is this contradiction more evident than in how they've evolved under Mike Schreiner's leadership. One of the clearest examples of this tension, and one that's caused no shortage of fury from both the left and the center, has been the so-called nuclear sellout, a term that's become shorthand for what many see as the Ontario Greens' betrayal of their core environmental principles. But it's also a case where the debate itself is badly in need of an update, because the argument from the left, though straightforward, I think is somewhat antiquated. Because for decades, the Greens were one of the only parties willing to oppose nuclear power on principle. To them, it wasn't just about the risk of meltdowns or unsolved problems of radioactive waste, though those are obviously very real. It was about the way nuclear energy locks us into a centralized, capital-intensive, heavily militarized energy system, one that is inherently tied to corporate power, state secrecy, and ecological devastation, from uranium mining to waste storage and so on. And in this view, Schreiner's willingness to entertain nuclear as a part of Ontario's energy future isn't just a tactical error. It is a betrayal of the entire green project and is seen as a capitulation to corporate interests that should be fought, not accommodated. Now, I feel like there is some truth to this critique, but what we're talking about here is traditional nuclear fission. This kind of large-scale, centralized reactor-type system that's defined by the current nuclear industry. Those reactors do pose real environmental risks, from waste storage to potential catastrophic failures, and they do tie us to an energy future to private capital and state-backed corporate monopolies. There's no ways around that. But here's the thing, is that fission isn't the future of nuclear energy. If we're serious about decarbonizing and democratizing our energy systems, nuclear fusion, which is the cleaner and safer and potentially revolutionary form of nuclear power, needs to be the center point of the conversation. Fusion is not just some sci-fi pipe dream. We're talking about a technology that could deliver essentially what is limitless clean energy with no long-lived radioactive waste, no risk of a meltdown, and no need for massive uranium mines tearing up indigenous lands. It is the closest thing humanity has ever developed to alchemy, turning hydrogen, one of the most abundant elements in the universe, into energy with almost no ecological footprint. That's the kind of paradigm-shifting breakthrough that we need if we're actually serious about meeting the scale of the current climate crisis. The problem with Mike Schreiner's pragmatism is that it is a half measure. It is an awkward compromise between acknowledging the need for baseload, non-carbon energy and the Greens' historical opposition to nuclear. But here's the thing, clinging to fission while ignoring fusion is just an outright bad strategy for anyone who claims to be a progressive environmentalist, because it keeps us tethered to all the worst aspects of that old nuclear industry. Corporate monopolies, dangerous waste, environmental racism, while we're missing the opportunity to leapfrog into a genuine transformative energy future. Any type of serious leftist environmental political project, one that actually wants to win, not just posture, would be making exactly the argument that I just made. It would say no to the dying corporate-controlled nuclear fission industry, but yes to a massive public investment into fusion research and development. It would demand that fusion energy be treated as a public good, not a commodity, and that the technology itself be democratized and decommodified from day one. That is the actual pragmatic path forward, not reheated anti-nuclear dogma from the 1970s and not greenwashing the existing nuclear industry for the sake of political convenience. If the Ontario Greens, or any Green Party for that matter, wants to stay relevant, they need to stop splitting the difference between radical critique and corporate accommodation. And what they should be doing is advocating for fusion energy as the backbone of a post-carbon, post-capitalist world. Because that's the fight. Not against climate change, but against the forces that would turn even our clean energy future into another playground for private capital. We either take control of it now, or we lose our future. Because this incrementalist drift away from realistic environmental pragmatism is what defines Mike Schreiner's leadership. To any type of principled political left, it's not just about policy details, it's about the entire orientation of their party. Where serious green politics would start from is a premise that the climate crisis is inseparable from capitalism itself, and that the logic of infinite growth and exploitation and commodification is structurally incompatible with our ecological survival. Schreiner's Greens have opted for a much safer and frankly, much more marketable approach, and under his leadership, the party's ambitions have been reduced to the standard suite of technocratic tweaks, better building codes, incentives for homeowners, and some nice tax breaks for electric vehicles. There's no systemic critique, no acknowledgement that solving the climate crisis requires dismantling the economic order that caused it. Instead, Mike Schreiner's Greens are offering voters a sustainable future where the market of global capitalism can keep humming along just with slightly greener packaging. This isn't ideological slippage. It is a broader co-option into mainstream politics. And Mike Schreiner's whole project has been to make the Greens a quote-unquote credible party, one that can sit at the table with the liberals and the Democrats without scaring anyone away. In practice, that means sanding off every radical edge until what's left is indistinguishable from a particularly earnest liberal backbencher's wish list. The Ontario Greens under Schreiner no longer present themselves as a force that is fundamentally opposed to the existing political and economic order. They are a party that wants a seat at the order's table, even if it means giving up everything that once made them distinctive. If you want to see what the Greens could look like if they hadn't gone this route, you only have to look at the Quebec Green Party or movements in Europe like People Over Profit. These are formations that, for all their faults, at least understand that the climate crisis is not a malfunction of the system. It is the system functioning exactly as it is designed. They don't want to manage capitalism more sustainably. They want to abolish it. They don't believe in working within the rules of the system built to maintain corporate power. They want to break those rules entirely. The Ontario Greens, like every other party operating within this neoliberal framework in Ontario, aren't interested in challenging the system. They're invested in managing it. They want to be liked. They want to be seen as the friendly, reasonable environmentalists who can balance green initiatives with the demands of the market, suburban homeowners, small businesses, and perpetual economic growth. In other words, they want to prove that they can serve capital just as loyally as every other party. And this isn't just a case of a party being too timid. It is really much just a perfect example of how electoralism under neoliberalism functions not as a means of change, but as a mechanism to absorb, dilute, and neutralize any genuine opposition. A party like the Ontario Greens, which markets itself as a conscience of the system, only serves to reinforce the illusion that the system has a conscience at all while ensuring nothing ever fundamentally changes. It's a political landscape where all the paths lead to serving capital. Participating in the game of electoralism isn't just ineffective, it is a part of the problem. So yeah, that's my critique of the Greens in Ontario.